All right, good morning. Welcome to the November 20th Sandag Board of Directors meeting. Let's start, please, with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And please remember to keep your mics muted. I'm hearing a little background noise. Want to get right into things. We've got a long meeting ahead. Could take us right up until noon, hoping not quite that long. Before we jump into the meeting, want to ask the clerk, Francesca, to confirm once more that we do have a quorum.
Thank you, Chair. We do have a quorum.
Thank you. We'll get started with public and member comment. Please raise your hand at this time so we can call on you, or press *9 if you're on the phone. Francesca, do we have any public comment on non-agenda items?
Chair, there are a few hands raised. Don Scholes is first.
Okay, this would be non-agenda. Don?
It's an agenda item.
Thank you. Francesca, who's next?
Joaquin Aganza.
Good morning. I'm Joaquin Aganza, and is this the appropriate time to comment on the Rancho Lilac?
No, sir. That'll be later in the meeting. Thank you. Francesca, who's next?
I believe that's all.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any board member comment?
Gustavo does have his hand raised.
Gustavo.
Thank you, Chair Voss, members of the board. As you probably heard in the news earlier this week, on Tuesday night, just past midnight, a highway worker working for one of our contractors lost his life when a vehicle, an errant vehicle, entered a construction zone on Highway 94. This is a tragic reminder that highway maintenance and construction remains one of the most dangerous jobs in the state of California. So what can we collectively do to make sure that this not happen again? We need to remember two easy phrases. The first one is to be work zone alert. What that means is when you see cones on the road or orange signs, pay extra attention. The second one is the move over law. The move over law requires all drivers to move over a lane when it's safe to do so, or slow down when they see amber flashing lights of Caltrans equipment, emergency vehicles, or tow trucks. Please talk to your families and friends about it. The families of all of our highway crew members, as well as emergency responder, are counting on all of us so that this tragic event doesn't happen again. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for that reminder, Gustavo. And I know, I'm sure I speak for the entire board, that our thoughts and prayers will be with the family of that person that lost their life. A terrible tragedy. Any other board comment? Seeing none, we'll move on to PAC chair reports. Do we have any comments from our PAC chairs? Nobody?
Mayor Dedina does have his hand raised.
Go ahead, Serge. Good morning.
Yeah, as chair of the Borders Committee, I just wanted to announce today we're having our tribal summit. It's an ongoing commitment on part of the Sandag board to work with our tribal partners and a commitment over the last few years to really increase the engagement with the tribe. So absolutely fascinating and really critically important topics being discussed. But I want to thank the Sandag staff who've done just an outstanding job of reaching out and collaborating with our tribal partners. So anyway, I'm assuming some of you will be there, but also with the new administration coming in at the federal level, the work that Sandag does, the innovative and really leader-full effort the Sandag Borders Committee does and our Sandag leadership team does to engage with Mexico, especially on OTI 2 and other issues that have included environmental issues as well, which we appreciate, is more important than ever. So I just want to thank again our staff and board for really empowering the Borders Committee and our staff to to continue that engagement with Mexico. It's not supposed to be easy, and it's really a great team. And I know personally I've learned a lot that we've applied to our water quality issues as well from the very comprehensive way that the board and staff work with Mexico. So that's it. And thanks, everyone.
Thanks for that, Serge, and thanks for your leadership on the Borders Committee. We'll look forward to hearing details of that meeting at our next meeting. Appreciate that. Any other PAC reports? Francesca, any public comment?
No, no additional public comments.
Thank you. We'll go to the Executive Director's report. Hassan, good morning.
Good morning, Chair. Board members, good morning to all of you. Over the past 2 weeks, President-elect Biden has released his transition team to usher in a new era of governance. Several members are friends of our agencies. Mr. Phil Washington, the CEO of Metro, Therese McMillan from MTC, Talks, the director of Caltrans, are on the transition team for transportation. One item that has been discussed in the upcoming administration is a future stimulus package with a major focus on infrastructure. While SANDAG will ensure that the region's priority projects are considered, I would like to request that if our members have any priority project of their own, to send them our way by December 4th. Please send to SANDAG staff Susan Huntington. Again, this is important as we want our region to be competing well against other regions in the country. It is expected that any stimulus will be very early next year. Some cities have already reached out this summer when we went through a similar exercise to prepare for a potential stimulus package. Over the next few weeks, we'll be meeting with our state and federal officials to continue to advance SANDAG as a leader in transportation planning and project delivery. I'm proud of the work that the team is doing, that we have done over the past couple of years to strengthen our relationship in Sacramento and in Washington, D.C. I'm confident the agency will be positioned well in the next year. Good news. We are very pleased to announce that the California Transportation Commission staff recommendations are out. In total, SANDAG has been recommended to receive over $155 million for several key priority projects. This is an amazing thing because under the TSEP program, the highest two priority projects statewide were projects in our region. To be specific, the Los Angeles Corridor and Otay Mesa 2. The following projects and award amount will be considered at the December 2nd and 3rd of the CTC meeting. Here are some of the programs that get funded. In the local partnership program, the recommendation is $7 million for bike and up and down in uptown project. In the trade corridor enhancement program, the TSEP, there are two recommendations. $106.4 million for the Los Angeles San Diego intermodal improvement program and $41.5 million for the Otay Mesa port of entry. Of note also, the city of San Diego is recommended to receive $22.7 million for its La Mesa Road project in South County. Let me just thank, first of all, the amazing team at SANDAG who put together the applications, and thanks our state partners, all of them who came through to fund these projects. We have, building off on a previous MOUs, Memorandum of Understanding signed decades ago, SANDAG is pleased to continue our partnership and collaboration with the Port of San Diego and Caltrans District 11 to provide trade and goods movement access to and from a state-of-the-art working waterfront. This is a new MOU, memorializes our collective interest to plan and build innovative projects that align with our programs, while positioning the region for future federal and state discretionary good movement funding. The future project developed from this MOU will be some of the first in the region to bring the complete corridor vision into reality. As a result, this project will tackle congestion while providing environmental benefits and equity to those that live and work in the surrounding portside communities. On the regional plan, I'm happy to report that we're continuing to present our vision and the outreach to our community and partners. Locally, over the past few weeks, we held a joint workshop with many of our working groups. We also held a cross-border mobility webinar with our partners in Baja California and with the SCAG and other interregional partners. I'm also proud of our team in bringing our bold vision to state leaders. A couple of weeks ago, we presented to a joint California Transportation Commission Air Resources Board and Housing and Community Development. It is important to note here that the state is looking for SANDAG to lead the effort moving forward of how we make planning a data-driven process and how we create and initiate a process where we can have a system that's faster, clearer, and cleaner. Staff is doing a lot of technical work right now required to complete the draft plan that will be out on the street next April. Del Mar Bluff. We learned this week that California Transportation Commission staff, like I mentioned earlier, recommended TCIP grant funding in the amount of $106 million. Los Angeles Corridor and just over $36 million for the Del Mar Bluff stabilization. We're about weeks away from finishing Del Mar 4. We're about to complete Del Mar 5 and 6. Let me say that with this funding, we think we will complete the short-term stabilization of the bluff. And we are in the study we're doing for that corridor, we're gonna look at the long-term solutions. I would not recommend to the board that they spend any more money in short-term solution for the corridor. State Route 11 OTMA support of entry also received $42.452 million from the state, is continuing and on schedule. Happy to tell you that we're almost a year away from opening the largest infrastructure project in San Diego history, that's the Mid-Coast. It's progressing on time and schedule. Central Mobility Hub is moving forward. We continue to work with our partners from the Navy, and we would hope to continue that effort moving forward. I know that we have a lot on the agenda. Let me just stop right here. Be happy to answer any question, Chairman, as the meeting goes along.
Thank you, Hassan. Francesca, do we have any public comment on the Executive Director's report?
No, Chair, I see no hands.
And any member comments? All right, we're going to move along to consent. Francesca, any public comments on consent?
No, Chair, I don't see any hands.
Thank you. Any board comments? Unless there are any comments or questions, I'll entertain a motion to move the consent agenda, please.
I'll move approval.
Sounded like Mayor Blakespear.
Yes.
Zero second.
Thank you. I'll call on the clerk for the roll call vote, please. Francesca?
Thank you. For the City of Carlsbad, Mayor Schumacher.
Schumacher, aye.
Thank you. For the City of Chula Vista, Mayor Salas.
Salas, aye.
Thank you. For the City of Coronado, Mayor Bailey.
Bailey, yes.
Thank you. For the County of San Diego, Supervisor Desmond.
Aye.
Thank you. For the City of Del Mar, Mayor Haviland.
Haviland, yes.
Thank you. For the City of El Cajon, Mayor Wells.
Yes.
Thank you. For the City of Encinitas, Vice Chair Blakespear.
Blakespear, yes.
Thank you. For the City of Escondido, Mayor McNamara.
McNamara, aye.
Thank you. For the City of Imperial Beach, Mayor Dedina.
Medina, aye.
Thank you. For the City of La Mesa, Councilmember Baber.
Baber, aye.
Thank you. For the City of Lemon Grove, Mayor Vasquez.
Mayor Vasquez, aye.
Thank you. For the City of National City, Mayor Sotelo Solis.
Sotelo Solis, aye.
Thank you. For the City of Oceanside, Deputy Mayor Feller.
Feller, yes.
Thank you. For the City of Poway, Chair Voss.
Aye.
Thank you. For the City of San Diego, Councilmember Moreno.
Moreno, yes.
Thank you. Oh, I apologize. I believe, just a moment. For the City of San Marcos, Mayor Jones.
Jones, yes.
Thank you. For the City of Santee, Mayor Minto.
Minto, yes.
Thank you. For the City of Solana Beach, Councilmember Zito.
Zero, yes.
Thank you. For the City of Vista, Mayor Ritter.
Ritter, yes.
Thank you very much, and that passes unanimously.
Thank you. Moving on to item number 10. Hassan, would you please introduce this item for us?
Okay. So the capital program short-term funding needs and consideration. Let me just say that you're gonna hear a presentation from the staff today on this program. But I wanna make sure that while the presentation is taking place, that you keep in mind a couple of things. This is about cash flow issues that the agency is facing. This is not out of the ordinary, but it is a real issue that we need to pay attention to. We have, when we started this discussion, we will have a cash flow problem somewhere between 150 to $200 million. There were a lot of measures that we could take to minimize that. But what I wanted the board to know before we get into the presentation, that while we might have solutions on the table, this is a real issue that could lead to you, the board of directors, making decisions about prioritizing project, or in some cases, God forbid, canceling project. I think after you go through the presentation, and we will invite questions and answers, but with that, I'll go to the staff for the presentation.
All right, thank you, Hassan, and good morning, Chair. We will begin our presentation this morning with Ray Major, your chief economist, who will provide an update on TransNet sales tax collections and some of the challenges that we're experiencing. And then we'll then continue with discussion of the short-term cash flow needs in the capital program that Hassan just alluded to, including the causes, and the brief presentation of the potential options to address and manage through this period of economic uncertainty. Right?
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Voss. Good morning, members of the board. Next slide, please. This has been a very challenging time to try to do any type of forecasting, as you can imagine. And I just wanted to give you an overview of what's happening with the TransNet sales tax forecast. Normally, by this time of the year, we would have prepared a forecast for next year, but we are running into there are just some issues, and most of them are related to COVID and also the state of California tax collection process. But the data collection during the COVID-19 shows there just significant volatility in the amount of sales tax revenue that we're collecting. And the length and the severity of this economic disruption is really very difficult to predict. A lot of it has to do with how much federal and state stimulus comes in, when it comes in, and these things all impact the long-term forecast, along with when the economy may or may not be reopened. And then to add uncertainty to our ability to forecast, the state of California revenue payment system has been changed, and it's very unpredictable in terms of the type of monies that we're getting for sales tax. So I am very confident that we will be able to do a forecast. There's no issue with that. But what we really want to do is to wait for some more data to come in so that we can make some predictions based upon data that occurred during the COVID time period. We only have data available through Q1 right now. The Q2 data just came in the last week or so, and some of it came in today. And that's going to allow us to see what the impact of COVID was on sales tax revenue. Next slide, please. There's challenges with the CDTFA, which is the California Department of Tax and Fee Administration. They are the ones who give us the sales tax, and they came out with new software in 2018. And so since 2018, and I'm not going to read this entire slide to you, there have been issues with the amount of money that we get. Now, we always get it, but sometimes there are delayed payments. Sometimes the businesses were late with filing their taxes, so that we had to have some true-ups, et cetera. And so it's been pretty volatile for the last couple of years, but it's very difficult to use as a benchmark for forecasting. Next slide. And this graph basically shows on the top, it shows the amount of sales tax that we were getting from CDTFA. You can see from 2013 through about 2017, before they changed the software system. We were very much in alignment. If you just look at the percentages, you can see that the top and the bottom were very much in alignment. In 2018, they started with the new software system, and you can see that the numbers don't exactly match up with what we've been getting from the state of California. We've been needing to make adjustments. Next slide, please. This shows the same data graphically, and it just shows that it was pretty easy to do the sales tax forecast up until 2017. And now you can see that the amount of money we get is kind of not in alignment with the data or with the numbers after we adjust them. So right now we're looking at, if you look at 2021, there's about a 9% difference. There's a gap there, and that's what we're trying to understand in the forecast. Next slide, please. This kind of shows you monthly how sales tax revenues look. And you can see here that there is some volatility in terms of monthly collections. And that's because sometimes we see spikes during the Christmas season, and you see the impact during the Great Recession. But you see that the volatility is about the same all the way through 2018. Next slide. And this is the volatility of the tax collection since the new system. And really what this just means is that it's much harder for us to predict based upon the data, because some months we may do really well, and then other months there's a correction for the previous month, and then you see that there's a dip. So it's much harder for us to forecast through that red. Next slide, please. So these are the things that have impacted the San Diego economy, and I've done presentations on this before. I won't belabor the point, but we've had job losses here in San Diego due to the COVID lockdowns over the last 8 to 9 months. There's been lost wages in the region. Our GRP has gone down, and we would expect that taxable sales would go down also. But what we're finding is that's not necessarily the case when we're looking at the data. It seems that people are still purchasing things, retail things, especially online. There was also a Wayfair decision, which means that we can now collect sales tax for those goods that are purchased online. And that's also adding to our sales tax revenue. That's another thing that we're taking a look at to make sure that we understand what the impact of that decision was. And that started last September. Next slide, please. This shows you the job loss in the San Diego region. Most of the jobs were lost in tourism and retail. Those are also the industries where we collect much of our sales tax. Tourism includes things like restaurants and hotels, and obviously retail, and then the entertainment industry like SeaWorld, the zoo, and people buying things and coming to the region and spending money. That's all represented in those industries, and those are the ones hit the hardest. Again, this points to lower sales tax revenue. Next slide, please. And we see the activity level at businesses has fallen significantly also. We're down somewhere between 30 and 50% from where we were pre-COVID. And so this should also be impacting the sales tax collections, because people aren't going to these categories, the ones that you see down at the bottom. And these are all the areas where we collect sales tax. Next slide, please. So when we take a look and we do a forecast of where we should be based upon economic data versus what we're getting from the state, what you see is the difference between the green and the blue line. There are two scales on here. One is the month of collection, and then there's the month of sale. So the month of sale is the month in which the event occurred, but it takes us 2 months to actually get the data. So we kind of need to make corrections for that. But if you take a look at economic activity, our forecast would show something like the green line, that when we went into the peak closures during April, that we would have reduced our sales tax revenue. As we reopened, we would be gaining sales tax revenue. Again, as reclosures happen, you would see a decrease. But what we see is the blue line. And you see that there were some deferred payments, we believe, in the May time period as part of the COVID response. The governor instituted a rule that any company paying less than $50,000 in sales tax revenue could defer those payments until the following year. So we believe we saw a dip happening in May in terms of collections then. And then you see that sales tax revenues actually increased, and they were ahead of where they were at the beginning of COVID. So there's a discrepancy here that we're trying to understand. Next slide, please. And this slide shows the economic forecast in the region. And we take 9 different national forecasts, and we do a consensus to try to understand where the economy might be going. And when we took a look in June at what those forecasts look like, we were down by about 7.8% in 2020. That was the forecast consensus of the economic forecasting firms, with a recovery of about 4.1% in 2021. By September, though, that forecast was significantly improved, and it had to do with federal stimulus and the fact that even though we shut down much of the economy, people were still making purchases, and people found a way to work from home in many cases. And so the economy didn't take as much of a hit in 2020 as we had believed when we first started doing the lockdowns. So that forecast was revised to a more optimistic forecast. We'll be taking a look at the consensus again this month before we do our final forecast, which will be out in January. Next slide, please. And this is my last slide, and I just wanted to show you here that the blue line shows the collections, and the purple line was our pre-COVID forecast. You see that we only have 1 quarter or 2 weeks worth of data actually of COVID, and that's where the blue line ends. If we took a look at what we forecast in June for our budget update, where we said that we would be collecting less sales tax revenue and then recovering with a V-shaped recovery, those were our assumptions in June, you would see the purple line. If we look at the new consensus forecast, it's forecasting more of a U-shaped recovery, and what we would see is that dotted blue line. So that would mean that we almost lose as much sales tax that we had predicted in June, but the recovery would take longer. But what's happening based on actual collections is the purple line, or the pink dotted line. And you see that we're doing much better in sales tax collections than we thought. The problem is that we really don't have a lot of data during this COVID period. So now that the data is coming in, we will be extending that blue line, which is the known data, and we will redo this forecast, and we will have a better understanding of where we might be in terms of sales tax collection over the next 5 years. And again, that sales tax forecast will be presented at probably the January or the February board meeting. And with that, I'll hand it back over to Jose to explain the impact on cash flow.
All right, thank you, Ray. So before I turn it over to Don, I wanted to provide additional context. So you may recall that about a year ago, the board approved programming about $600 million in TransNet state and federal funds for over 3 dozen projects and funds that were anticipated to arrive year over year from fiscal year 20 to 25. These funds represented the entirety of the formula funds anticipated through this period that were not already programmed on some other project. So since then, work has started or been expanded on many of these projects, and great progress is being made despite the pandemic. But it goes without saying, and just kind of reflecting with what Ray just said, that under current economic conditions, some of that $600 million that the board budgeted a year ago may not arrive may not arrive as my computer froze. I'm sorry. As anticipated. So unless measures are taken, this may result in cash flow shortfalls. And this is further exacerbated by the way that funding for transportation works. As some of you know from your own cities, state and federal funds work on a reimbursed basis. And this means that an agency must front its own local funds first to pay for contractors before submitting a reimbursement claim to either the state or the federal governments. In some instances, the local agency, or SANDAG in this case, must hold this expense for several months. Given just how the funding works, having sufficient local dollars to make these advance payments is essential. With the uncertainty of how long and how deep the economic impacts will be on TransNet revenue collections, staff has analyzed a number of options that would give the board additional flexibility and expanded financial tools to ensure that disruptions to ongoing projects are minimized and that sufficient funding is available to make these advance payments. Most of these options are familiar to you and have in fact been used in the past as part of the agency's cash management. Some of these actions or options are actions that staff would recommend regardless of the economic conditions, as they would provide short-term and long-term savings, stretching the value of the TransNet dollar. Other actions are more prudent and conservative in nature and are intended to help the agency address and manage through this period of uncertainty. And while no approval is being requested today, staff will recommend that the board approve in the next month or so all actions included for consideration today. And so with that, I turn it over to Dawn to provide more details.
Thank you, Jose and Ray. Can I get the next slide, please? All right. So on an annual basis, SANDAG staff updates the costs and revenues for the plan of finance to assess the health and funding needs of the program. And as Jose mentioned, last September, new projects were programmed. And in fiscal year 21 budget, we included those project costs and revenues. And those additional costs have been incorporated in the plan of finance model, along with the rest of the multi-year TransNet capital projects. So revenues were also updated, and they reflect the May 2020 TransNet forecast. In the short term, over the next 5 years, the projected cash flow needs exceed anticipated revenues in the range of $170 to $220 million. So what caused the issue, and could it have been foreseen? So generally, the shortfall is a result of several issues, and these include the updated short-term forecast related to COVID. Over a 5-year period, the TransNet anticipated revenues went down in that 5-year period by $70.8 million. An acceleration of expenditures on some projects also occurred within those multi-year budgets, and a lengthy process to get federal funds approved also causes some of the cash flow shortfall. So regarding acceleration of expenditures, it should be noted that no projects have exceeded their approved multi-year budgets. However, some projects have spent or intend to spend funding earlier than the cash flow can accommodate. So for larger projects, some of them that contributed significantly to the accelerated expenditures include the Midcoast project, the Central Mobility Hub Multimodal Transportation Facility project, and the Environmental Mitigation Program. Next slide, please. So this slide is just to show you that identifying these shortfalls and the borrowing needs is really not unusual, because we generally issue debt about every 2 years, and we did so through 2016 through the major for the Major Corridor Program. And since that time had some subsequent financing items for Midcoast backed by the TIFIA loan and the full federal full funding grant agreement for the Midcoast project. And just last year, we had a refunding that freed up some borrowing capacity, and that allowed the additional bonding for the bike program. Next slide, please. So in May of this year, the short-term forecast again was updated due to the COVID impacts, and there is still some uncertainty what that economic recovery is going to look like. State revenues are also uncertain and have been reforecast, and state transportation capacity for fiscal years 2021 and 2022 were reduced this past summer. And while there is still uncertainty, there are some very favorable economic conditions to help us reduce debt service and free up some new capacity. Next slide, please. So today, we will be presenting options to consider to address cash flow needs during this unique time, but no option by itself is enough. So a combination of strategies is needed. And these include refinancing the existing bonds to lower borrowing cost. That would create new capacity to issue additional bonds. Releasing the Series 2008 Bond Debt Service Reserve Fund, executing interfund loans, and increasing the commercial paper program. Next slide, please. So starting with refinancing and new borrowing, the current conditions are such that refunding the remaining 2014 bonds is recommended, and it's estimated to generate 24.7 million in savings, 14 million of which would be in the 2021 to 2025 period. And these same conditions make it favorable to refund the TIFIA loan and replace it with a lower interest rate loan that could generate over 100 million in savings, most of which is long-term savings on the Commission's junior subordinate lien starting in 2026. And if the new rate is as low as 1.5%, savings generated would be about 156.2 million. And even at 1.75%, the savings would be about 113 million. If the rate rises to 2%, we can still achieve savings of 87 million. Finally, if the TIFIA draw is delayed and the short-term notes are refinanced another 12 to 18 months, an additional 10.5 million could be saved long-term. That is allowable under TIFIA policy that states the draw must occur within a year of the start of revenue service, and that's currently anticipated in November 2021. So we could delay that draw as long as to November 2022. And these refunding actions would generate capacity for new debt issuance with proceeds of roughly $113 million. Next slide, please. So we would still need other options to bridge the gap, and these include releasing the debt service on the 2008 bonds. That's about $17 million. And a debt service reserve fund was very typical when those bonds were issued. However, we haven't carried debt service reserve funds on subsequent issuances, and the credit rating of the Commission hasn't relied on having a debt service reserve fund. SANDAG funds debt service payments monthly in advance, which mitigates risks for investors. So staff is currently working with Bond Counsel to determine the easiest mechanism to release that funding. Next slide, please. So the next option is interfund loans, and they are essentially internal borrowing from one fund to another to internalize risk and minimize our borrowing costs. They're allowable under the ordinance, and the example you may be familiar with is the major corridor loan to the Environmental Mitigation Program. Interfund loans could be used to continue funding the Environmental Mitigation Program without additional borrowing from the Major Corridor Program. Instead, for example, the local Environmental Mitigation Program funds could be loaned to the Major Corridors Environmental Mitigation Program with interest to be repaid to the local program. Next slide, please. And the next option is increasing the commercial paper program. That would provide additional flexibility through the next 5 years to help address short-term cash flow needs. The current commercial paper program is 100 million and could be increased to 200 million. Next slide, please. So even with all these options, there is a remaining gap of $40 to $90 million. That could be addressed by delaying projects starting in 2022. And the board would have this discussion as part of the fiscal year 2022 budget development process, starting in February or March 2021, at which point we should have a better idea of where the revenue projections will be. In the past, the board traditionally has chosen to continue forward with active projects and hold those projects that have not yet started. Next slide, please. So the agenda item before you includes a memorandum from our financial advisor, PFM, as attachment 1, and it outlines all the strategies presented and also considered our Sandag's debt policy, existing indentures, our debt service coverage ratio, and our credit ratings. As indicated on page 9 of the memo, the described refundings and new issuance could decrease Sandag's debt service coverage on the senior lien from 2.86 to 2.71. And that means for every dollar spent on debt service on the senior lien, there would be $2.71 of sales tax collected in the prior fiscal year. And this should still support the AAA credit rating on the senior lien. The suggested portfolio of options considers the impact of short and long-term borrowing on the agency's credit rating and the debt service coverage requirements in our policies. Next slide, please. So the schedule for next steps is as follows. This month we're here to start the dialogue, and in November we're also working to select our underwriters and bond and disclosure councils for the proposed actions. We are also working on the TIFIA documents, as you'll hear in the next presentation. And we expect to be back in December with some proposed financing documents. They would come for final approval in January. And in January, there is also a commercial paper item coming to the board for approval that could include the proposal to increase the line of credit. We expect the TIFIA refinance to be completed at the end of December or early January. And also in early 2021, we would come back for approval for the refinance of the short-term notes. And we expect updated revenue forecast to inform the fiscal year 2022 budget scheduled for consideration in March 2021. And then the final budget adoption would be scheduled for May 2021. And so that concludes our presentation today. I will turn it back over to the chair, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Righty, thank you all for that presentation. A lot to digest. I want to remind everybody this is a discussion only item at this point. Francesca, do we have any comment from the public?
No, Chair, I don't see any hands raised from the public.
Okay, and member comments, Supervisor Desmond?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate it. To staff, thank you very much for the candid upfront discussion here, telling us where we are, and we knew it would be potentially grim, and I'm glad that you're putting out many options. Item 11 here is actually one that was heard at the Transportation Committee to refinance the TIFIA loan, which I think is a good idea. But one of the options that you mentioned was, there was $600 million that we approved for the major corridor projects. I would like to put on the record that money should not be moved from projects or used as a last resort. Projects that were approved in TransNet. That credibility of Sandag is, I think, foremost on the minds of a lot of people in San Diego County. And if we were to take money from those TransNet projects, I know there were other projects in those corridor projects that were not TransNet. I would like to see that the TransNet projects, particularly those prioritized by the board, the 78, the 67, the 52, and the 94, 125 interchange, if there's money coming out of the corridor, that those would be considered last, if or at all. So I appreciate the time, and I understand the hard work and the struggles you face. Like to help out as best we can, but we want to keep our priorities as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor. And just so everybody knows, that beeping that just stopped, thankfully everybody was hearing it, and sounds like we got it figured out. Do we have other member comment? Council President Gomez, good morning.
Good morning, and thank you to staff for the presentation. And I recognize that sometimes these types of reports are not the most exciting ones, but it does reflect the reality that we're currently living through. And but I just really wanted to acknowledge that I'm appreciative of really bringing this conversation forward and starting to think about what we need, what the agency needs to do, being that some of these issues are going to continue. I definitely support all the current proposals in terms of what we're looking at, to really try to minimize and readjust some of the impacts related to cash flow. So thank you for being creative. Thank you for not really eliminating anything at the moment. And then I'm sure that once it comes back to the board, future board will make those decisions that make best sense for the agency. I think differently than Supervisor Jim Desmond. I do think that everything should be at the table, and to really, because at the end of the day, this is about the agency and making sure that we continue the agency afloat, but also be responsible. So continue doing the analysis, and I know that it makes it hard trying to figure it out, and especially during these moments when data is a little bit in flux. But I really truly do appreciate bringing that reality to all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Council President. Council Member Moreno.
Thank you for the presentation, and thank you to Sandag staff for bringing this cash flow issue to the board's attention. Based on the presentation, it's clear that we're running out of cash to front projects until federal and state funding can reimburse us. And even with more borrowing, we're still going to be short millions of dollars that will prevent us from moving projects forward on schedule. I think staff should present the board with revenue options that could potentially solve these problems. At some point, we're going to need to go to the voters and ask for more revenue. And one benefit of doing so will be solving this cash flow problem. So thank you. And that concludes my comments.
Thank you. Any other board members with comments on this discussion only item?
Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I just, and I appreciate the board comments. And let me just keep you with this. We started the discussion with 170 to 220 million dollars between 21 and 25 cash flow issues. Even if we do everything that Don outlined, we will still have 40 to 90 million dollars of cash flow issues. We got into trouble in the past by letting you hear the good news as opposed to letting you hear what actually the situation is. I'm telling you right now, as your executive director with my team, that this is a real issue. And for that, you should keep in mind that at one point, this board is going to be making decisions about whether, to move all the project or maybe not start a new project, et cetera, et cetera. But I don't want you to leave this saying that the solution we presented is going to solve the issue at hand. There is a significant cash flow issue. Staff are amazing here. They have all the creative ways, but at the same time, we're not going to do them at the expense of losing our credit rate, the excellent credit rating we have, or running out of reserves. We're going to continue to explore all options. We'll continue to let you inform, but this is by far is not going to be solved by just letting you know what you want to hear, as opposed to what it is. But I appreciate the board members' comment. My staff and I will go back and continue working very hard and keeping you informed. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Kranz, did you have your hand raised?
I did, and I am just speaking up to ask about specific projects for the Low Sand Corridor. There were the Bataquitos Lagoon double tracking, the San Diego Phase 2 double tracking, as well as the Del Mar Bluffs 6 that we're wondering if they are included in the cash flow needs assessment. And so that level of specificity would be very helpful for planning purposes, and perhaps Mr. Cronic could speak to those particular issues.
Sure, sure. We just received the funding for the Los Angeles corridor from the TSIP program to complete Bluff 5 and most of 6. So in terms of the bluff stabilization, we're there. We did not receive money for the lagoon or the double tracking. We did not receive state funding. But that could change as the state learns more about funding. But Councilmember Krantz, just like everything else, I think everything is on the table when the agency facing this kind of cash flow issues, everything. From the things that the board approved last September, the $600 million tip, to things that's planned to come, all the corridor studies, everything on the table for the board to make a decision. And if, God forbid, we continue to have significant cash flow program, at one point you're going to have to make a decision which projects not to start, which projects to stop, and which I would say the first thing you want to do is not stop anything that started, and then go from there. But everything on the table. Unfortunately, we did not receive funding for the lagoon project or the double tracking.
Thank you, Hassan. Any other hands? Again, this is a discussion only item and we've got a full agenda. So Mayor Sotelo Solis.
I wanted to make sure you saw my hands there, Chair. Thank you so much. And I want to just echo the sentiments of my colleagues that all elements should be on the table when we have this discussion, that we should really exhaust all options when it comes to making sure that we have a sound, fiscally sound organization, but also too that this is not, the ask is not based off of any mismanagement or overspending or anything nefarious, but it really has come down to, and from my understanding, this has also too been part of the long-term conversations of these monies, that there will be a nexus, there will be a time where the revenues and the expenditures will finally meet, and we have to have those really difficult conversations. And you know what, that's why we're here. And I just want to again urge my colleagues, we may be having to have more difficult conversations, and no pressure, Ray, but you know, come spring, we're going to be really relying on those numbers to help guide us in the future. So again, nothing nefarious, no mismanagement, but again, past boards have known, and again, because of where it's finally meeting in that little X, we are finally at that point. So thank you again, Chair, for the opportunity to share my thoughts.
Thank you, Mayor. Any final board comment? Seeing none. Again, this was discussion only. So we will move on. Thank you to the team for lots of food for thought. We will now move to item 11. Supervisor Desmond, I believe you're introducing this one.
Yes, Mr. Chair, and right along with the last item, this is Sandag entered into a Transportation Infrastructure and Innovation Act, or a TIFIA loan, for the Mid-Coast Corridor project in June of 2017. The interest rates have dropped significantly, and the Build America Bureau, the federal agency that administers the loan, is allowing agencies to undrawn loans to enter into new lower term rates. So staff has presented this item to the Transportation Committee last week and received unanimous support to recommend the board to approve the replacement loan that could save the agency more than $100 million in long-term borrowing costs. And Andre and Dawn are going to be here to present the item. Thanks.
Hey, thank you, Supervisor, and thank you, good morning, members of the board. As the supervisor just said, this is a great news story that we hope to save approximately $100 million. In fact, if rates were to be the same today, when we close, we'd save approximately $150 million. So as you're aware, the Mid-Coast project is nearing completion, and over the last several years, we have brought a number of financings to you for the $2 billion project, including short-term notes or bands, medium-term notes or GANs, and long-term bonds. And in 2017, we took out a TIFIA loan, which we have not yet drawn upon. Now, when the COVID pandemic hit earlier this year, the Federal Reserve slashed short-term rates to nearly zero, and long-term rates, including the 30-year Treasury, which the loan rate is tied to, significantly fell as well. So today we'll be presenting on the proposed refinancing of the existing TIFIA loan. As a reminder, TIFIA loans are low-interest loans provided by the federal government for large infrastructure improvement projects such as the Midcoast, and are administered within the U.S. Department of Transportation through the Build America Bureau. Next slide, please. So in addition to the SANDAG team that have worked on this effort so far, we have also been working with our financial advisors at PFM, and Peter Schellenberger is on the call today, as well as Victor Shu of Norton Rose Fulbright, who is our outside bond counsel. Next slide. So in today's presentation, we'll be covering three main areas: why we are replacing the loan, the description of the main components of the loan, and lastly, the review of the various loan documents which are included in the package today. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dawn.
Thank you, Andre. Next slide, please. So before I begin actually on this slide, I want to address some technical changes that were made to the recommendation that was presented rather to the Transportation Committee last week. The changes were made per the recommendation of outside counsel, and they clarify what actions are being taken by the Regional Transportation Commissioner, RTC, and which are being undertaken by SANDAG. The substance of the action is the same. So the first change is in recommendation item number 2, the words TIFIA bond were added, and the draft TIFIA bond was included within the draft TIFIA loan agreement that was presented to the Transportation Committee, though it was not specifically called out. And second, in recommendation item number 3, the RTC resolution was updated to a SANDAG resolution to make it very clear that this resolution relates to SANDAG's actions on behalf of SANDAG rather than SANDAG's actions on behalf of the Commission. These changes do not change the substance of the recommended action. And with that, we can move on to address why we are proposing to replace the loan. So as mentioned in the opening remarks and by Andre, we have an opportunity with low long-term rates to save over $100 million by refinancing. And the original TIFIA loan had an interest rate of 2.72%. Previously, the Build America Bureau would not have considered a replacement loan, but since COVID-19, they've adapted their practices to provide a streamlined process to replace TIFIA loans that have not drawn upon their funds. So SANDAG began working with our financial advisor and the Build America Bureau in the summer to analyze options. And in September, we submitted a letter of interest to begin the process of securing a new loan. The item itself is being accelerated to meet a December 19th meeting of the Council on Credit and Finance, which is commonly referred to as the Credit Council. And no Credit Council meeting was set for January. With the change of administration, there is some risk of delay if we don't act quickly to try to secure approval in December. Additionally, the 30-year Treasury rate upon which TIFIA loan is based has been below 2% since late February, but it had started inching upward in recent months. So we feel it's very prudent to work toward execution of the loan quickly while we continue to monitor the rate. Next slide, please. In terms of the loan terms themselves, they are expected to remain consistent with the original loan, with the exception of the interest rate. And for a quick review of those terms, they include a single draw on the funds, a 5-year deferred repayment, meaning once we draw the funds, we don't begin repayment for 5 years. It is a backloaded loan, so in the model, debt service costs increase as time goes on. The loan terms included the issuance of the short-term notes. We've discussed that briefly, and the short-term notes are a more cost-effective way to fund the project costs until we actually need to draw on the TIFIA bond. The debt service coverage ratio requirements, credit rating requirements, and additional bonds test requirements in the existing loan would remain the same. Next slide, please. The cost of the replacement loan are expected to be less than the original loan because the TIFIA, Build America Bureau has not requested any additional review by its contracted financial advisors, and they have not asked for any new credit ratings with the application. Sandag will need, however, to pay its own legal and advisory costs, and we will need to pay legal costs on behalf of the Build America Bureau. Also, as with the original loan, there is an annual servicing fee. For 2020, it was $14,000. And regardless of whether it's the new loan or the existing loan, those costs would continue. So the costs are estimated at about $400,000. Next slide, please. Just a quick review, Sandag has debt obligations on 3 separate lien levels, and we provide different priority of sales tax payment to investors based on the respective lien levels. The TIFIA loan is a 3rd lien junior subordinate lien obligation. And the primary benefit, again, to the replacement is to reduce our long-term debt service as discussed in the earlier presentation and again now. Next slide, please. Sandag currently has AAA ratings on senior lien obligations, and in June 2020, Standard & Poor's and Fitch affirmed our ratings on the junior subordinate lien or the TIFIA lien of A+ and A respectively. And as mentioned, the Build America Bureau did not require new ratings with our loan application. And so now we will move on to the attachments to the report. Next slide, please. So the first attachment is the memo from our financial advisor that provides the market update and discusses the TIFIA loan structure and financing considerations. The following attachments will be presented by Victor Hsu of Norton Rose Fulbright, discussing particular documents related to the loan. Next slide, please. Here you go, Victor.
Thank you, Dawn. So attachment 2 is the Sandag direct agreement. Updates to the existing agreement are needed to reference the replacement TIFIA loan agreement and update signatories. This agreement reflects Sandag's role as the implementing agency for the project, as a party to the FTA full funding grant agreement, and as contracting agency for the construction contract. Next slide. Attachment 3 is the MTS direct agreement. Updates to this agreement are also needed to reference the replacement TIFIA loan agreement and update signatories. This agreement reflects MTS's role as the contracting agency for the acquisition of vehicles, traction power substations, and fare collection systems for the project, as well as their role as the operator. Next slide. Attachment 4 is the TIFIA loan agreement, reflecting the terms discussed previously, with no significant changes anticipated other than the interest rate update. Where general information is outdated, it will be updated there as well. Next slide. Attachment 5 is the 10th supplemental indenture. It's needed to reference the new TIFIA loan and provide for the issuance of a new TIFIA bond, since the existing loan will be canceled once a new loan is executed. The 7th supplemental indenture, which referenced the existing TIFIA loan and provided for the issuance of the existing TIFIA bond, remains in effect for all other provisions. Next slide. Attachment 6 is the resolution approving the TIFIA financing method and authorizing the executive director to execute documentation on behalf of the Regional Transportation Commission. These documents include the new TIFIA loan agreement and TIFIA bond, the Sandag and MTS direct agreements, and the 10th supplemental indenture. The Regional Transportation Commission, as the TIFIA borrower, is signatory to the direct agreements And the direct agreements reflect project delivery commitments of SANDAG and MTS for which the commission is borrowing. Next slide. Finally, attachment 7 is the second resolution necessary to authorize the executive director to execute the SANDAG direct agreement on behalf of SANDAG. Now I will turn it back to Dawn.
Thank you, Victor. I am going to now turn the presentation over to General Counsel John Kirk, who is going to discuss board responsibilities related to this action.
Thank you, Dawn. While the transaction that's before you today is not a bond transaction that's subject to the particular regulatory requirements that apply to bond issuances, nevertheless, as referenced in the report, it is important for board members to become familiar with the documents that are related to the proposed transaction in order to make an informed decision and to ensure that there are no inaccuracies concerning SANDAG or the commission in those documents. In particular, board members should review the representations and warranties that are contained in section 14 of the draft loan agreement. That agreement is attachment 4 to today's report, and that particular section begins on page 110 of the report or page 178 of the PDF. In reviewing the documents, you should ensure that, to the best of your knowledge, all of the factual statements are correct in all material respects. To the extent that you're aware of any inaccuracies, you should make that fact known. When carrying out your responsibilities in this respect, you are allowed to reasonably rely upon staff, counsel, both internal and external, and our financial consultants, all of whom are present here today and are available to answer any questions that you may have. I'll also share with you that SANDAG's TransNet Director, Jose Nuncio, Finance Director, Andre Dujan, Chief Capital Programs and Regional Services Officer, Jim Linthicum, as well as I as your General Counsel, have all reviewed these documents, and we've been involved in their preparation and their negotiation. And to the best of our knowledge, all of the factual statements in these documents are true and correct in all material respects. And with that, I will turn it back to Dawn and the panel.
Thank you, John. Next slide, please. So in terms of next steps, in early December, we expect a loan approval, and loan execution is expected to follow in late December or early January. And the request before you today is as follows. Next slide, please. The Transportation Committee recommends that the Board of Directors, also acting as the Regional Transportation Commission or RTC, approve a Transportation Infrastructure Finance and Innovation Act or TIFIA loan agreement and associated direct agreements to secure a replacement loan for the Midcoast Corridor Transit Project and the 10th supplemental indenture, providing for the issuance of a junior subordinate sales tax revenue bond evidencing the RTC obligations under the TIFIA loan agreement. Additionally, the Transportation Committee recommends that the board, 1, acting as the RTC, approve the replacement TIFIA financing method for the Midcoast Corridor Transit Project. 2, acting as the RTC, adopt RTC resolution number RTC 2021-02, authorizing the executive director to execute the TIFIA loan agreement and direct agreements, the TIFIA bond and the 10th supplemental indenture. And 3, adopt SANDAG resolution number 2021-07, authorizing the executive director to execute the SANDAG direct agreement. And this concludes the presentation. I will turn it back to you, Chair.
Thank you, Dawn and Andre. Francesca, do we have any public comment on this item?
No, Chair, I don't see any hands from the public.
Thank you. And member comment, I'll be looking for a motion and a second. Member comment, please.
Desmond, I'll move to approve.
Thank you, Supervisor. Any other member comment?
Sotelo Solis, second.
Thank you. Any other member comment or questions? We have a motion from Supervisor Desmond, a second by Mayor Sotelo Solis. I'll call on the clerk for a roll call vote, please.
Thank you. For the City of Carlsbad, Councilmember Schumacher.
Schumacher, aye.
Thank you. For the City of Chula Vista, Mayor Salas.
Salas, aye.
Thank you. For the City of Coronado, Mayor Bailey.
Bailey, yes.
Thank you. For the County of San Diego, Supervisor Desmond.
Desmond, aye.
Thank you. For the City of Del Mar, Mayor Haviland.
Haviland, yes.
Thank you. For the City of El Cajon, Mayor Wells.
Wells, yes.
Thank you. For the City of Encinitas, Vice Chair Blakespear.
Blakespear, yes.
Thank you. For the City of Escondido, Mayor McNamara.
McNamara, aye.
Thank you. For the City of Imperial Beach, Councilmember West.
West, aye.
Thank you. For the City of La Mesa, Councilmember Alicio.
Alicio, yes.
Thank you. For the City of Lemon Grove, Mayor Vasquez.
Mayor Vasquez, yes.
Thank you. For the City of National City, Mayor Sotelo Solis.
Sotelo Solis, aye.
Thank you. For the City of Oceanside, Deputy Mayor Feller.
Feller, yes.
Thank you. For the City of Poway, Chair Voss.
Yes.
Thank you. For the City of San Diego, Councilmember Moreno.
Moreno, yes.
Thank you. For the City of San Marcos, Mayor Jones.
Jones, yes.
Thank you. For the City of Santee, Mayor Minto.
Minto, yes.
Thank you. For the City of Solana Beach, Councilmember Zito.
Zito, yes.
Thank you. And for the City of Vista, Mayor Ritter.
Ritter, yes.
Thank you. And that passes unanimously. Chair Voss, I believe you're muted.
I knew that. I'm going to move on to item 12, a brief quarterly budget update. Ray and Andre.
Thank you, Chair. So if you recall, when the fiscal year 21 program budget was approved at the June board meeting, staff committed to come back to the board on a quarterly basis to review the revenues and expenditures, propose budget amendments if necessary. So this item before you is an informational item to give you a status of the budget for the first quarter. On the revenue side, the final fiscal year 2021 program budget included $1.18 billion in local, state, and federal funding. About half of that funding comes from federal and state sources, and as of September 30th, those revenues continue to come in as projected, and we expect they will for the remainder of the year. The other half of our funding comes from local sources, primarily TransNet and TDA sales tax revenues, which are coming in higher than projected. But as Ray discussed in the item 10 earlier, we have some challenges and issues with the CDTFA reporting, but we're getting some new updated numbers in this month that hopefully Ray will have a more accurate projection going forward, and we'll bring that to you at the second quarterly update when we come in February of next year. Looking at our expenditures as of September 30th, we are 25% through the year, and the administration budget is tracking closely as expected. The expenditures in the three primary components of the program budget, the overall work program, regional operations and services, and the capital program are less than the quarterly 25% that may be expected for a quarter. However, this is not unusual since many contracts are awarded in the first quarter and may not get underway until the second or third quarter. In addition, some of the expenditures may not be captured as not all billings may have been received in the time period. Now, the board budget expenditures are lagging at only 11% spent, but under the COVID environment that we operate in, that is expected as a significant amount of the board budgets are parking, travel, and meeting expenses. So to conclude, we do not propose any budget amendments at this time, And as mentioned earlier, Ray and I will be back in February with the second quarter update. So Chair, that concludes my comments. I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you. Sounds like there's still quite a bit to learn, and hopefully we'll have a better sense of where things stand in the spring. Francesca, do we have any public comment?
No, Chair, no public comments.
Thank you. Any member comment or questions? All right, this is an information item only. So we'll now move on. I'm going to take an item out of order. We're going to jump to item number 14, the Rancho Lilac discussion. Hassan, if you would, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning to all of you again. Over the last few months, you have received a lot of emails and have heard public testimony about the Rancho Lilac mitigation property located in the Valley Center community. Today, you will consider approving a contract that will provide for the perpetual management of the property in exchange for conservation easement. Some of the communities are supportive of the chosen contractor, the San Diego Habitat Conservancy, and some individuals have concerns. Staff feels that the contractor is well qualified and was selected through a fair, transparent, and competitive procurement process. Staff is also recommending that the trail access easement to be provided to Sandag prior to transfer of the property. The easement will provide assurances that the trail could be developed once the feasibility and planning studies, design, and environmental clearance are complete. Finally, I want to remind the board that this is a state-owned property. Any transfers of the property would require approval from the California Transportation Commission. And with that, I'd like to turn the presentation over to Kim Smith.
Thank you, Hassan. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Good morning, Chair Voss and members of the Sandag Board. My name is Kim Smith, and I'm the Program Manager here at Sandag for the Environmental Mitigation Program. Item number 14 on your agenda today is the potential approval of the proposed contract award for the Rancho Lilac property. So next slide, please. Many of you have already heard, or this has come to the board before, but just to give you a little bit of background, Rancho Lilac is a 902-acre property located in the community of Valley Center within the county of San Diego. As shown on the map above, it's the large magenta parcel circled in yellow. It was acquired by Caltrans in October of 2011 as net benefit biological mitigation required under the TransNet ordinance for the State Route 76 improvement projects, along with several other properties along the San Luis Rey River Valley, also shown in magenta on the slide. After no federal, state, or local entity expressed interest in taking the property, the Sandag Board authorized the release of an RFP in 2014 to identify a land manager to manage Rancho Lilac in perpetuity. The RFP was released to the public in 2016 and 3 proposals were received. The San Diego Habitat Conservancy was selected for negotiations in 2017. From 2017 to 2020, during negotiations of the endowment with SDHC, Caltrans also had to work on getting the property ready for transfer. In March of 2020, Sandag finalized negotiations with SDHC on the cost to manage the property, leading to the May 22nd, 2020 Sandag Board meeting, where the board was asked to approve the execution of an agreement for the transfer and long-term management of the property. Next slide, please. At the May 22nd Board of Directors meeting, members of the public brought up the concerns that transfer of the property from Caltrans to a private entity would preclude future public access and trails within Rancho Lilac. Staff was then directed to continue to work with interested parties and return to the board with additional information and a recommendation. Historically and currently, there is no public access or trails on the property. However, the county general plan shows plans for future trails running north and south along Lilac Road and east and west across the center of the property, as shown on the slide above. The Valley Center community is currently going through an update to their community plan, which would address trails, including access and connections throughout the community. Since the May 22nd board meeting, staff worked with outside legal counsel to look at options that would allow the property transfer to move forward, not preclude public access in the future, and ensure that the biological, cultural, and historic components of the property were protected. In addition, 2 community meetings were held in October with over 100 participants to gather additional input. Next slide, please. Today, Sandag staff is recommending that the Sandag board award the transfer and long-term management of Rancho Lilac to the San Diego Habitat Conservancy. SDHC was recommended for award through a fair competitive procurement based on information available in 2016. Additional assurances to accommodate a future trail would be secured through a trail easement, a draft which is shown in attachment 2, pages 326 to 345 of your agenda. Sandag would then offer the County of San Diego an exclusive negotiation agreement for the study and potential development of future public access trails on the Rancho Lilac property, consistent with the conservation and trail easements. Next slide, please. If the board chooses not to approve the contract with SDHC, there are other options that they could consider. First, Sandag could cancel the existing RFP for Rancho Lilac and work with Caltrans to develop a new scope that includes the study of feasibility, potential planning, construction, and maintenance of a trail system on the property. This option would result in additional costs to the project and delays from the issuance of a new RFP. And second, the board could direct Sandag to cancel the RFP and recommend that Caltrans include this property in ongoing negotiations with the County of San Diego. Caltrans is currently working on the transfer of several state-owned properties along the San Luis Rey River to the county, and those were shown in the magenta on my first slide. Caltrans could work with the County of San Diego to negotiate a proposal for the management of the property and the required endowment. This option also could result in increased cost and delays to the project. Next slide, please. Therefore, the recommendation before you today is that the Board of Directors is asked to first authorize the Executive Director to execute an agreement for the transfer and long-term management of mitigation land with the San Diego Habitat Conservancy and accept a conservation easement as a condition of release of endowment funds. Second, to authorize the Executive Director to negotiate and accept a trail easement from Caltrans. Third, to find that the proposed actions are exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act pursuant to CEQA guidelines sections 15306, 15325, 15316, and 15313C. And fourth, to direct staff to offer to the County of San Diego an exclusive negotiation agreement for the study and potential development of a future trail system. Thank you, Chair Voss and members of the board. That concludes my presentation. Keith Greer and I would be happy to take any further questions you may have.
Thank you, Kim. Francesca, I know we have comments from the public. I'm going to, because of our robust agenda today, comments will be limited to 2 minutes. After we've heard the first 2 public speakers, we will not take additional public speakers if you have not already logged in. I believe our first public speaker, happy to have Supervisor Greg Cox join us. Supervisor. Can we get Supervisor Cox up?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Well, number one, thank you, Chair Voss and members of the board for allowing me to speak on this item. County of San Diego manages 100 different locations across 53,000 acres of land, including 36 local day use parks, 19 regional parks, 9 camping parks, a number of open space preserves, and several registered historic sites. Additionally, we manage 350 miles of trails. We are confident that our Parks Department for the County of San Diego can manage this property as well. We are confident because we have a proven track record as a large-scale habitat manager that is often successful with gathering resources to conserve habitat while also providing public access with educational opportunities. If the property were transferred to the San Diego Habitat Conservancy, which we respect and certainly work with, the staff's report indicates that there is no guarantee of trails being placed and any sort of public access implemented. if trails were implemented, it is unclear if the public would be able to provide input on the development of the public access plan and whether the county will manage it if it chooses to do so. I thank you for the opportunity to speak and just want to reemphasize the county is willing and able to manage the Rancho Lilac property. We would ensure that the Rancho Lilac habitat and species are thriving while also allowing public access in areas that would not be impacted. Therefore, we would recommend and ask your consideration as the best option is the other option 2, which is at the bottom of page 2 of your report, which would cancel the RFP and allow Caltrans to include the Rancho Lilac property in the ongoing negotiations with the county for the other properties near San Luis River. As was mentioned, the county and Caltrans are already in negotiation of 4 properties in the San Luis Rey area. These properties are also mitigation lands for SR 76, just like Rancho Lilac. The county would be the sole owner and manager of all mitigation lands for SR 76, ensuring consistency of management and monitoring across all lands if you went with option 2. It would be certainly the most efficient for the county and Caltrans to just negotiate directly as they currently do. Therefore, option 2 is the best option for you to consider, in my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor. Francesca, who do we have next?
Next will be Joaquin Aganza.
Hello, thanks for taking my comments. I am in support of having, in agreement with Supervisor Cox in having the county manage this property because of its complex cultural and historical aspects in addition to conservation access for critical species. The county has a good track record for handling these multiple use properties, and I think would be the most appropriate. I represent Friends of Hellhole Canyon. We are in support of preservation of land for preservation of species. However, in this case, this property is more amenable to being managed by San Diego Parks and Rec. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Thank you. Next is Libby Lucas.
Good morning, Chair Vouse and members of the board. I appreciate this opportunity to provide my comments. I've also provided written comments a couple of times. I support the approval of the staff recommendation and ask that you do as well. Regarding the 2 alternate options to awarding the contract with SDHC, would you please explain how Sandag could do either of these without incurring further legal scrutiny and damaging its credibility? The staff's recommendation includes offering to the county the exclusive negotiation agreement that Kim mentioned. If the board approves this recommendation, I hope that you would also stipulate that any proposed trails on the portion of Rancho Lilac west of Lilac Road occur only after there are existing designated trails within Valley Center that lead to this portion of the property. There really is no point in having a trail on Rancho Lilac that doesn't connect with other trails. Furthermore, trails should always be on open spaces not conserved for biological conservation where such open spaces are available. Regarding the exclusive negotiation agreement with the county, please explain.
The chair would like to cut people off at 2 minutes.
Hello?
Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Would you please explain the duration of the negotiation agreement with the county? And given the well-documented incompatibility of trails and recreation with biological conservation, I request that Sandag use EMP funding to support the participation of recreation ecologists in analyses conducted to determine the compatibility of proposed trails on lands conserved for the perpetuation of sensitive species in San Diego County. And my last.
Francesca, I'll just rely on you to call on each subsequent speaker, and speakers, you'll note that your microphone will cut off right at the 2-minute mark.
Thank you. The next speaker will be Robson Splain. Robson, are you able to unmute yourself? If not, we'll move on to the next speaker.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Thank you. Good morning to all of you. My name is Robson Splain. I'm the former vice chair of the San Diego Design Review Board, and was so at the time that the family who owned Lilac Ranch first came in to propose housing developments on the property. Needless to say, I grew up in an area just like this, and I'm thrilled that they're not going to be tract homes on the property. But I also wanted to just state that I support Mr. Cox's idea of transferring everything over to the county. I think they'll do a great job. And I think that to not have the access to the property would be kind of a lost opportunity, being that I've kind of been through this before, where in a valley where my family had owned ranches and it all turned into housing developments and such. So I would support the idea of turning it over to the county, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you. The next person is Donna.
Hello, I would like you to vote no on this agenda item and consider option number 2. I think it is very important that San Diego County Park and Rec takes the ownership and management of this property. By you canceling that flawed RFQ and drafting a new one, that can be considered, or as Greg Cox said to directly give it to them and have them work with Caltrans. That would be a perfect solution. This is a real opportunity for all of San Diego County to have a beautiful place to go that would be well protected as far as conservation, and also have public access guaranteed, which I feel is really important. San Diego County Park and Rec already manages 53,000 acres. They have many preserves, which are very well maintained, also have public access. With COVID-19, it became very clear to us that we do not have enough multi-use trails. Physical activity is very important. The walking, the hiking, the biking, and the horseback riding. When the parking lots were locked down, there was nowhere to go because we don't have anything locally that we could get to, ride to, walk to, or bike to, which was what was recommended at that point in time. Please, please consider option number 2 and don't lock us out. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next will be Deborah Mosley.
Yes, hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, Chair Voss and members of the board. My name is Deborah Mosley. I am the chief of the Environmental and Resource Management team at the County of San Diego Department of Parks and Recreation. In July 2019, we were approached by Sandag staff asking if we were interested in taking ownership of the Rancho Lilac property, and if so, to subsequently submit a cost proposal by March 1st, 2020. As requested, we did submit a proposal to Sandag in February of 2020 that included the county's proposal to add Rancho Lilac to the county's open space preserve system as part of the Multiple Species Conservation Program, or MSCP. In our proposal, we described our plan for the property in which we would develop a habitat management plan, or HMP, including surveying the sensitive resources on site. The HMP would also include the development of a public access plan in conjunction with Sandag and the public that would outline the proposed plan for trails and a staging area on site. The HMP would guide our management and protection of the sensitive resources on site, including the protection of habitat, the endangered species, and the cultural historical resources. The HMP would also outline the management activities for the public access, such as trails proposed on site. I am here to answer any further questions you may have from the county on this item, and I really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. The next person will be Don Scholes.
Hi, this is Don Scholes, and I'm the Executive Director of the San Diego Habitat Conservancy. Based on some previous comments that were just made, I wanted to emphasize a couple of items that have been previously expressed in letters and to the board and at public meetings. First and foremost, that SDHC is the most qualified manager for Rancho Lilac, and that was determined in the bid process in 2016. Regarding a comment that Deb just made in the HMP preparation, no matter who is the manager or the owner, the process is the same. And here we are at the end. We're near the finish line after 4 years. We've invested thousands of hours in monetary expenses with Sandag and Caltrans staff to develop necessary documentation to date. We're well qualified. We have the support of Sandag and Caltrans staff, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, the San Diego Foundation, numerous environmental groups, neighbors of Rancho Lilac, and other residents of Valley Center in the county. We are emotionally invested and ready to get started on the important work that needs to be performed at Rancho Lilac. We call for your leadership today to get started. I urge the board to vote in favor of item 14 to award this contract to the San Diego Habitat Conservancy. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Pam Weidenkeller.
Thank you for taking my call. I'm a resident of Valley Center, and I'm asking you today to make a vote for the future. I want you to please consider voting against awarding Rancho Lilac to San Diego Habitat Conservancy and instead vote for option 2. Rancho Lilac was purchased with public funds and it should remain owned by the public. The county is the best option to manage this property. They will protect sensitive habitats and historical features, as well as provide public trails. Going forward with Habitat Conservancy is surely a dead end for public access, as there will be no funding to support building and maintenance of trails. The Valley Center Trails Association Board, as well as the Board of Valley Center Parks and Rec, unanimously support the county's management of Rancho Lilac. Please do the right thing for not only Valley Center residents, but for all of San Diego County by ensuring public access. Vote yes on option 2, and thank you for taking my comments.
Thank you. Next is Bruce S.
Thank you. I'm a resident of Valley Center, and to me, this is a simple problem with a simple solution. The property was purchased with public funds, and by that fact alone, the public should be guaranteed access, along with the habitat preservation and the cultural asset protection the property deserves. The problem is that the RFP did not ask for public access, and the proposal for a floating easement is just a Band-Aid that only makes believe that there will ever be public access to the property because it doesn't provide the necessary funding. The RFP was and is flawed and should be rescinded. The solution is simple. Vote against awarding Rancho Lilac to San Diego Habitat for Conservancy, and instead vote for option number 2 to allow San Diego Parks and Rec to manage the property. They have the track record to do the job. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Mark Larson. Mr. Larson, it looks like you've put your hand down. Go ahead and raise it again if you would like to speak, but we'll move on in the meantime to Pat D.
Hi, are we on now?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. So I'm Mark Larson. I'm a resident of Valley Center and a frequent visitor to Rancho Lilac. In fact, I own some artwork in my home from I bought from the Abby Wolfsheimer years ago. And I want to say strongly, please preserve this property for public access. There's so much history there, and to not do so would be a tragedy, I think. It would just be a shame. Eleanor Roosevelt spent many summers at that property. President Roosevelt visited it. In the Valley Center History Museum, we have Eleanor Roosevelt's desk that she used at that property. And to give it to the Habitat Conservation League, I think would be a disaster because as far as I know, there are 30 properties they currently have don't allow public access. So it's such a simple equation and it's a beautiful property. Those of you that haven't seen it, once it's awarded to the county, I think you'll really enjoy it and be so proud of creating a legacy of another beautiful public park. John Wayne's favorite trail ride on Keys Creek Road also went through there. So it's just such a simple equation to make it, give it to the county parks and make it a county park. And I believe anything else with less would be tragic.
Thank you. And now Patsy.
Thank you for taking our input. I'm a resident of Valley Center, and I strongly urge you to vote no on awarding the contract to San Diego Habitat Conservancy. Caltrans can negotiate with county parks and recreation. They have a long history of effectively managing similar properties that balance preservation and public access. Please do not cut us out from this beautiful property. We in Valley Center do not have very many trails on which we can recreate. And at this time, it's very, very important that we have more trails in our community. Thank you for strongly considering option 2 and voting yes for it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Fred Wallman is next.
Thank you. My name is Fred Wallman. I live in Valley Center and I have a business in Escondido. The question before this board is who's better qualified to manage 902 acres of sensitive habitat, historic buildings, and cultural sites? San Diego Habitat Conservancy, who currently manages less than 2,000 acres on about 30 sites with no historic buildings or true public access. Or San Diego County Parks and Rec, who managed, has been stated, over 53,000 acres, including 40,000 acres of sensitive habitat, and has a wealth of experience dealing with public access. Rancho Lilac at 902 acres is half the size of Palomar State Park. It's a huge piece of property. Why would you want to have two levels of management? One organization to manage the habitat and then another organization layered over the top to handle public access. Please don't give this property to a private foundation. This property should be owned and managed by a public entity that's accountable to the public. Please consider option 2, give the property back to Caltrans so they can negotiate directly with the county. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Mark Kupchak.
Good morning. My name is Mark Kukacek, and I am the trail advocate for the Bonita Valley Horsemen. I believe that it is important to allow public access to the Rancho Lilac property through an established trail system. I don't believe that the San Diego Habitat Conservancy is willing or able to create and maintain a trail system if they are awarded a conservation easement for the Rancho Lilac property. I would request that the board cancel the existing RFP option 2 and initiate a new conservation easement to the County of San Diego's Department of Parks and Recreation to manage the property and create a trail system. The county's Department of Parks and Recreation have created and managed many other properties with similar requirements and are eminently qualified to do the same for the Rancho Lilac property. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next is Frank Landis.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can.
Thank you. Chair Voss, members of the board, thank you for taking my testimony. My name is Frank Landis, and I'm speaking on behalf of the California Native Plant Society to urge you to follow staff recommendation and award management of Rancho Lilac to the San Diego Habitat Conservancy. SANDAG conducted a proper selection process, which was won by SDHC. As for the issue of trails, I urge the Sandag board to follow the science and make the decisions in the proper order. Time to consider on-site public access is once the required habitat management plan has been completed, the easement has been negotiated, and appropriate locations for public access have been established. And I've seen nothing from SDHC to say that they're actually not going to maintain some of the trails that are already on site. In contrast, from what I've heard and what I've seen as a long-term parks volunteer, we can expect that the San Diego County does not have the personnel to maintain the trails. We can probably expect 50 or 60 miles of unauthorized trails to proliferate across the site if it's left to county management. I don't think SDHC will be quite that understaffed. Lilac Ranch was purchased as biological mitigation for the impacts of highway construction, and it needs to be managed to serve its intended purpose. Managing the site for conservation and carbon sequestration in no way precludes the presence of trails. However, pushing for trail proliferation will damage all other functions, including the ones which you want to purchase it for. We have seen such damage in preserves throughout the county on lands managed by the county. The staff made the correct decision. Please follow the recommendation. And thank you for taking my testimony. And I wish more of the pro-environmental people in the county were speaking up, such as Supervisor Fletcher. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Lori Flora.
Okay, I think I've unmuted.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Trails through Rancho Lilac have been on San Diego County's trails map for years. Somehow this was ignored by the county's board for years. San Diego was close to giving the property to the San Diego Habitat Conservancy with no mention of trails at all until it was finally exposed to the public. When the public uncovered this and made noise, an attempt was made to patch things up by suggesting a floating easement, which would theoretically allow trails in the future. However, SDHC has not been interested in trails, and until 2 months ago stated very clearly on their website, and I quote, SDHC's preserves are closed to the public. In September and October, while attempting to preserve their win, this property, they deleted that statement from their website. I wonder why a sentence was slipped into paragraph 14 of the trail easement agreement, which states that Sandag can terminate the easement at any time at their sole discretion. This implies that Sandag isn't serious and wants an easy way to kill the trails. The easement only pretends to allow trails. It is unlikely the trails would ever be built while the property is owned by SDHC. However, San Diego County Parks and Rec has a clear interest in trails. If they owned the property, it is much more likely that the trails which have been promised might actually be built. Valley Center is well below San Diego County's average of trails per capita. It badly needs more trails. An overwhelming majority of participants in the last 3 county meetings spoke against giving this property to San Diego Habitat Conservancy, and you're seeing the same thing today. Please don't let this opportunity be taken away. Please convey the property to San Diego County Parks and Rec. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Donald Drudoff.
Thank you. Chairman Voss and board members, please reject the staff recommendation and approve the awarded to award to San Diego Habitat Conservancy. Please save some staff time and expense by instead approving staff option number 2, terminating the RFP process and allowing the county to directly negotiate with Caltrans County Acquisition and Management in perpetuity of Rancho Lilac. This will result in appropriate long-term conservation and protection of the mitigation property while ensuring public access to a non-motorized trail system for this regional jewel property. My personal thanks to my former boss when I worked for Chula Vista when he was the mayor, Supervisor Cox, for his support and comments introducing this item. Thank you for taking my comments.
Thank you. Next up is Walter Kirkwood.
Thank you for hearing me. We vote for Backcountry Horsemen San Diego. We vote for option 2. It's a mistake to give this to the Conservancy. No access would be allowed. And looking at the history of this property, people need to enjoy it. We will help any way we can, the county in maintaining and establishing proper trails. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Janice Shackelford.
Janice Shackelford, thank you. I am in Lakeside. We have had several properties turned over to various conservancies that have fenced all access and basically ignored our community trails master plan. In this case, I support the option 2. The original RFP was really flawed because it did not provide any access, any consideration of public access to the property. And I now support option 2 and turn it over to the county. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is a call-in number that ends in 464. Please press *9 on your phone to speak.
Hi, I'm Lori Jacobs in Valley Center, and I'm requesting that you set aside the current RFP and staff recommendation. I'm in favor of county participation. I believe the planning and RFP process went off track early on when it deviated from the initial vision presented to Valley Center in 2012 of mitigation as both conservation land balanced with responsible public trail access. Please give us a credible path forward to achieve both of those important goals, conservation and public access. It's clear that only the county would be able to deliver on managing sensitive habitat areas, funding for public trails, and be able to manage trails. Please don't consign my community to yet another large and unavailable mitigation property. We've been waiting 8 years for this decision. Please hold the faith with us and pursue the county option. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Anita Noon.
Hello? Can you hear me?
We
Yes,
can,
ma'am.
thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your patience and for taking my comments this morning. I am a voter, environmentalist, hiker, and a business owner. I urge the board to support the option 2, canceling the RFP for Rancho Lilac property and recommending Caltrans inclusion of Rancho Lilac property in ongoing negotiations with the county. I thank you for all the work that you've done on this project, and I urge you to continue working to bring it to its best conclusion, a public property managed by a public entity that is used by the public. Please don't give up now. Despite the twists and turns this process has taken, your constituents deserve the excellent management that the county can provide. Thank you.
Thank you. Next will be Eric Mondero.
Good morning, members of the SANDAG board. My name is Eric Mondero, and I'm the board president of the San Diego Habitat Conservancy. And I'm just urging a yes vote to approve the Rancho Lilac contract award to SDHC. The Conservancy won the RFP in 2017, and for about 3 years, we've negotiated a comprehensive proposal with SANDAG staff. And after this lengthy negotiation period, which required significant staff time and resources, we submitted our final revised budget proposal to SANDAG July of last year. So final approval of this contract award is pending before you today. I would like to emphasize the responsibilities of SANDAG under the California Public Contract Code and reiterate that SANDAG approved the contract award to SDHC today. We look forward to fulfilling our role in conserving, preserving, and managing Rancho Lilac for generations to come. And the habitat management plan hasn't been developed, and the Conservancy does not oppose the inclusion of trails in the plan. And while that decision to establish and implement trails does not rest with SDHC, we stand ready to work with the lead agencies and other stakeholders. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next will be Robert Lerner.
I want to make sure you can hear me.
We can, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I am the historian for the Valley Center Historical Society, and the board of directors of the Historical Society and History Museum have authorized me to speak in their behalf. For 7 years, our organization was involved with Caltrans and with the San Diego Habitat Conservancy to ensure the responsible preservation and restoration of the historic ranch and its natural habitat. For a couple of years, we were considering serving as assignee of the actual property, but withdrew. The Rancho Lilac property, however, is more than simply a ranch. It is a living museum. Much of American and world history was written here due to the status of its owner, United Nations Ambassador Irving Solomon. And those of us at the Valley Center Historical Society personally knew members of the Solomon and Wolfsheimer families. We respect that the Conservancy is well qualified at protecting the natural habitat of the ranch. However, we fear that the historical aspect will be blocked if there is no public access allowed, which appears sadly to be the case. It is therefore our position that the RFP be reopened and the San Diego County Department of Parks and Recreation be allowed to bid as owner. Thank you, Chairman Voss and members of the board for hearing these comments from the Valley Center Historical Society.
Thank you. Next will be Jamie Neasley.
Good morning, members of the board. My name is Jamie Neasley. My parents moved to Valley Center when I was in 2nd grade and I attended Valley Center schools. I am a Carlsbad resident. Rancho Lilac at 902 acres is half the size of Palomar Mountain. Palomar is a state park, yet if Rancho Lilac is owned by San Diego Habitat Conservancy, it becomes private property. It is not right that such a large property be owned by a private foundation that will control all access and use by the public. Rancho Lilac is first and foremost an open space preserve to restore native plants and wildlife. That should never be compromised. Human presence on this type of property enhances and provides a level of stewardship for the land. Public presence can teach the next generation of environmentalists to love, appreciate, value, and save more wild places. Human presence can prevent bad things from happening in wild places. San Diego Habitat Conservancy is a fine organization and does great work. However, due to the size and complexity of managing Rancho Lilac, the County Parks and Recreation is better suited to own and manage the property. I hope you vote against the recommendation of SANDAG and vote for option 2 and reopen the RFP. Thank you.
Thank you. And our final public speaker is Terry.
Hello, this is Terry Jorgensen. I'm with Backcountry Horseman San Diego Unit, and I'm speaking to you. Thank you for taking my comments to vote and to encourage you to take option 2 as discussed by so many previous speakers. It's well documented, the support for San Diego County Parks to be the expert in this field. They have many years of expertise in this area. They manage many parks. Our Backcountry Horseman unit has worked with them on various projects throughout the county and had very good results with everything. providing for both habitat and for recreation. We would be happy to continue that relationship in this area. We also bring to the table our ability to help with trail building, trail maintenance, patrol. The San Diego County Parks has their own patrol services, which would be even more eyes on the property to keep it safe. Also that both the county park organization and with Backcountry Horseman organization, we have people available to teach, leave no trace, and teach the public how to take care of sensitive property, how to stay away from areas that they need to, and to provide that support to the community and to the public so that they and their children and grandchildren will be able to enjoy the area and also to preserve it for the future. So I urge you again to please select option 2 and provide this to the county parks. Thank you very much.
I want to thank all the members of the public that took the time to weigh in today. That is much appreciated. I know it's not the most convenient thing to be able to do, but we really do appreciate your input. We'll now go to member comments. Supervisor Desmond.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate the opportunity and all the discussion and the callers. One thing I just want to clear up for everyone is the county did not just come in as the late Johnny come lately and say, trying to muscle our way in here and take this property away from the Conservancy. It was actually in July of last year when Sandag actually approached the county and asked us if we were interested. And this is a Parks and Recreation Department, wasn't my office or anything like that. And we were, and we worked out a plan for submittal, and the county submitted a proposal with the trails in March of this year. I can only imagine the reason Sandag reached out to us was because they probably heard from many people, but public property, they wanted public access. And this is not a knock at all against the San Diego Habitat Conservancy. They do a great job. The people there do good. The people, their hearts are in the right places. They do a fantastic job. It's just public access is not in their wheelhouse. And according to their website a couple months ago, it wasn't there at all. So they do a fantastic job. It's just, I think it really comes down to, this is a public property and should public access be allowed, and how is that best managed? The RFP really had no mention of public or trail access. And even though with a public access easement, which is being proposed by staff, it does no good without trails or staging areas. And staff has made it clear that the Conservancy will not construct, maintain, or accept liability for the trails. They want the county to do that. And we do a great job of constructing trails and preserving land that we have a vested interest in. We receive credit for preserving both land and through our MSCP and the county's climate action plan. I know our climate action plan is under litigation, but one area of agreement is that a measure to require the county to acquire or manage open space land and to be counted towards our CAP goal. Land acquired by other entities such as conservancies cannot be counted towards our CAP goals. And we're still working on our CAP, and we're trying to get it to a good place. With that, I'd like to make a motion to approve option 2 in the staff report to cancel the RFP for Rancho Lilac property and recommend to Caltrans inclusion of the Rancho Lilac property in the ongoing negotiations of the county, who will install and maintain the parks and trails in a manner that always allows access and protects the plants and animal species. That's the end of my motion, but my legal counsel has told me I have to say and make the statement that I am an employee of the county and I receive a salary from the county. However, I am receiving no personal benefit from this at all. So just had to tag that on to the end of my motion. So thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor. Mayor Blakespear.
Yes, thank you. So thank you to all the public speakers and for the many times that we've talked about this. I just have to share my position, which is that I'm not able to support the staff recommendation because I really don't believe in my heart that we will end up with access if we do go with the San Diego Habitat Conservancy. And I would love to have that have been worked out because I think they're a fantastic organization that does great work. And it would have been great if there was a solution that allowed us to respond to this. They responded to the RFP and that we were able to add access into this. But when you listen, I listened really closely to all the public speakers, and I particularly paid attention to what the executive director of the Habitat Conservancy said, and the president and the staff member who also spoke. And they really are not committed to providing access on this property. This is 1,000 acres. And that is a tremendous loss, I think, to the community if we don't allow access. So, you know, just to highlight what was said is the executive director said that they're the most qualified manager, that they won this RFP, that the process is the same, which I totally understand. And the president said that they are committed to conserving and preserving and working with other agencies. But really, at the end of the day, to me, it comes down to I think there's been a question for close to 200 years in this country, and it was also the founding of the National Park Service about preservation is really important, but if you don't provide access, then you don't give people a way to love the land. And if they don't love it, then they don't act to preserve it. And so I think there are a lot of quality of life issues related to access, but it also just comes down to a philosophic commitment that I feel and have, that if we don't provide access to these places, that people do not appreciate what the value is of wilderness. And so I do support the idea of not awarding this contract. I understand that we have been through this for process, and it has been legitimately run. So the RFP went out in 2014. But I guess what I have to say to that is that we still maintain our authority, which is to say yes or no here. And things change, that there is a different understanding of what we want from our county lands, the development that's happened in the interim, the priorities we have, and that if it costs a little bit more and it takes a little bit more time, then it's worth it, because this property is so big and we have so few parcels that are like this, that are already preserved as mitigation. And now we get to decide, is it going to be just basically completely fenced and allow wild animals and plants to live there, but very little access or historic understanding? Or are we going to go through the process to allow that access? And so to me, that is something that's important. It's worth doing. And I am willing to accept the consequences that come from that. So thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Would that be a second to Supervisor Desmond's motion?
Yes.
Thank you. Councilmember Alicio.
Yes, thank you, Chair Voss. Just, you know, this is the subject that's near and dear to my heart, as everyone on the board knows. I was most taken by the comment by the gentleman from the Historical Society up there. And I think he represented 3 different groups. And it seems to me, in fairness and transparency, and everything else, that the option to bring it back another RFP, trail access, whatever, and have the county compete, as well as the other applicants who, I saw one letter from someone who said, you know, who were proposing the award to go to, they don't even have a staff biologist, and open it up. As Mayor Blakespear says, you want to do this right. It's a huge parcel. So as much as I understand the sentiment behind the motion, it's not one that I can get behind. And I think the best thing to do in the appearance of transparency, openness, is do another request for proposals, reopen it, and let the board look at whatever proposals come in, including anything from the county. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Schumacher.
Thank you very much. You know, it's been interesting, but I've received, and I don't know whether or not the rest of the board members have also received, a significant amount of interest in this in emails and constituent concerns. And the majority of the requests that I have had from members of the public and environmental groups has been to support the staff recommendation for the San Diego Habitat Conservancy, supporting that transfer. In our area, in Carlsbad, we have interacted with the county on management issues, and I do have some concerns as to how the county might manage those lands. And I do feel that in parallel with a lot of the comments that I received, that there is a reason to ensure the wildlife has a place in San Diego County that is reserved for wildlife. We're talking about increasing housing, which is incredibly important, more affordable housing and increasing density. And as we continue to do that, we're going to be limiting the space, the natural habitat for many species of animal and sage and chaparral in our county. So I would like to make a substitute motion to approve the staff recommendation. I would look for a second on that motion. Thank you.
I'll second, Councilmember Gomez.
Thank you. Sounded like we had a second to the substitute motion from Council President Gomez, if I'm not mistaken.
That is correct.
Thank you. Mayor Salas.
Yes, thank you very much. And I want to thank everyone for weighing in on this really important topic. And even though I'm from the South County, I truly understand the concerns of all the community members of North County that talked so eloquently about this beautiful piece of property, but also that that piece of property should be enjoyed by people. Mayor Blakespear stated it very well, is that if you can't go and enjoy the beautiful habitat that there is, then people will not fight to preserve those kinds of things in the future. And I also believe that Councilmember Alessio really had a good point in that, issuing a whole brand new RFP is a good option to do, because that way you build in the trust and the buy-in. We'll have the opportunity to look at really different proposals in their entirety and make the best selection based on what's the best option for the public and for wildlife. That has to be a balance. So that's where I kind of stand right now, is in support of the recommendation number one, or excuse me, the option number one.
Thank you, Mayor. Council President Gomez.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. And I want to thank the public for engaging, and also the many letters that were also sent. I too received quite a bit. And I agree with Councilmember Schumacher. A lot of it was to support staff recommendation. I do want to remind us that, the reason that we're having this conversation at all is because this was a mitigation. This literally is mitigation land for the purposes of conservation. And I get the whole purpose of having access by the public. I get that. I mean, I love going out. Nature is the place where I go and ground myself quite often. So there's a lot of value in terms of having access to nature. But there's also a significant amount of value to really try to strive to do real conservation, which is something that we're lacking in our society. We have very little places that are not accessible to people, and there's a reason as to why. We gotta remind ourselves that we, just by that pure accessibility and going into nature, we're impacting nature when we're in it. Yes, we need to value it, we need to learn from it, and we need to learn the importance of why nature is critical. But we have very little land in our region that is real conservation. So I do think that if we have that possibility to do here, which by the way, I do think that there is still possibility to have additional conversations. And I think this is a question to staff. If this award were to be awarded today, if it gets voted by the board, what does that mean in relation to this request from the public to influence the design of this project in terms of including trails and figuring out where those trails are most appropriate?
can address that. This is Keith Greer. So if this was awarded today, the next step would be the California Transportation Commission would have to transfer the land. Once that's done, within 18 months, the contractor would have to do a habitat management plan, which identified the feasibility and locations for potential trails. Sandag and Caltrans would have to prove that habitat management plan. Along the way, the stakeholders and other agencies would have to be included in that to get their input and perspective. Ultimately, if the habitat management plan wasn't acceptable, then they would have to redo it again, but Sandag board would have the ultimate approval of that HMP.
Thank you, Keith. And thank you so much.
Council member, I'm sorry, Chair Voss and Council member Gomez, just a couple of clarification in that regard. Whatever action you take today is whatever it is, but I think the board need to know that this RFP was open to everyone, including the county, and the county chose not to submit a proposal.
That's going to be a follow-up question.
So to Supervisor Desmond's indicated that, well, in July, we contacted the county because we felt the county is the right entity. That's not so. We contacted the county in July because in April, Supervisor Desmond's office asked us to. And when we did contact the county, the negotiated price with the county is over $1 million, 1.3 million more. So when the board says take option 2, keep in mind that there is additional cost that nobody is committing to. And 2, the county has ample opportunity to bid like everybody else. They didn't. And we contacted them at the request of Supervisor Desmond's office, and the price negotiated was higher. And number 3, I also invite you to ask the lawyers. I'm not a lawyer, don't know the legal. There is some legal issues that we could face. The lawyers will talk to that. But also there's a credibility issues. When you have an RFP process, fair and square, and after the fact, somebody comes and said, well, I'd like it. If we do that with every RFP we have, we lose a credibility as an agency. I just want to make sure this is clear to the board as you move forward and make
Thank you, Hassan.
Thank you.
Council President Gomez, did you have more?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to reiterate, and that was going to be a follow-up question in regards to the RFP process and who was able to bid and not. And it was my understanding that the county didn't bid on it, but they did have that ability to do so. So that's important for the board to be mindful of. But I just really want to remind us that if the aspect of adding trails, just like we were just told right now, that will be something that this board will be able to influence as the conservation management plan is developed. Just to know that you can influence it during that period of time. So thank you.
Thank you, Council President. Mayor Jones.
Thank you so much. Just one, well, I have a couple of comments. First of all, in San Marcos, we have 72 miles of trails. I think it's really important that we have a connected trail system throughout the county, through the cities, through the county. And I think it's really important that we do protect the habitat, of course. It's beautiful, San Diego. One of the reasons that people come here is because it is so beautiful, but they also like to get outside. And I think there is a balance there by providing the habitat that is conserved and also offering limited access. And I think that would be achieved. And I look at the county and I think about their trail system and how well they take care of it. I often move from our trail system to the county trail system, and you can't tell, and we spend a lot of time and effort in maintaining our trail system. So I do appreciate all that they've done. I think that providing going with the staff's recommendation, I'm a little concerned with that because there is no, for sure, in writing that we will absolutely have those trails. So I am very, very concerned with that. So I for one, support the original motion by Supervisor Desmond and seconded by Mayor Blakespear. And I do have a question though. I was a little confused about what our director said about the being contacted by the county, that it was Supervisor Desmond, because I had a lot of conversation about this in the past and I didn't understand So could I get some clarification on that, maybe by Supervisor Desmond? Or staff? I'm not sure.
Supervisor
I
Desmond?
just,
Jim?
It's news to me that my staff contacted him. I had no idea about this project at all until it was last August of 2019, when I was out in Valley Center for something else, and they asked me to come and view the property. That was in August. There was a member of Caltrans there. You know, we got emails from Keith Greer about the contacts in July. I don't know if there's any, unfortunately, this is going sideways really from what the whole crux of this is, and this is about public access to a public property. I have no recollection at all of contacting or even asking. I didn't even know about this property until August of last year. So I'm kind of confused and perplexed about Mr. Hassan's statement, but this is really kind of taking us sideways. Should the public have access to public property?
Yeah, let's move on. Mayor Jones, did you have anything further?
no, thank you.
Thank you. Gustavo?
Thank you, Chair Voss. So Caltrans was mentioned many times here because we are an integral part of this. So I want to start by saying thank you to Kim and the rest of the SANDAG staff that have been working on this patiently for 5 years, and also for her presentation. So we bought this property as part of the EMP, and the EMP is really a success story that is actually being held throughout the state. So right now, what we're talking about is transferring the property to a qualified land manager. And I have no doubt that both the San Diego Habitat Conservancy and the county are both qualified land managers. And I do believe that staff's accommodation of the public's request for public access through this easement that would be preserved for SANDAG, that SANDAG could negotiate with the county, would preserve that the possibility for that public access through a development of a trail system through the property. But I did want to underline one thing that Kim said at the end of her presentation, which is that if we go with option 2, which basically says it's going to come back to Caltrans, and Caltrans will negotiate directly with the county, depending on how long that takes, there's a lot of short-term costs to maintain the site. And Caltrans is maintaining the site at SANDAG cost. So I think Mayor Blakespeare mentioned that hey, if it takes a little longer and it costs a little more, that's fine. And yes, if it takes a little longer, time is money. And we heard an item earlier where we were talking about how there's going to be a shortfall of money in the region, and every dollar is going to count. So delaying the transfer of this site, if that's what the board wants to do, we will definitely implement that. We'll help as much as we can, but it will have a cost that will be transferred to the region.
Thank you. Mayor Sotelo Solis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I just wanted to share that I too received a number of emails regarding this item, and they were majority in support of the staff recommendation. And what I was curious about is when we say close to the public, what that means, because my understanding is that when we have other federal agencies have to close or restore habitat, it's for a temporary time. Now, what that temporary means is all in context, right? It could be a year, it could be a couple months, it could be, longer than that. However, when we look at who has supported that from the 2014 organizations like the Sierra Club, and again, there were a number of organizations that showed support. And somehow my birds always do this. They start chirping right when I'm talking. So sorry about that. But I just want to share that as we talk about those temporary closures, we do have the ability to have access to the public through those through the mitigation plan. And I think if we which is what I think Keith mentioned earlier to Council President Gomez's point, that if we are able to move forward with the, the second motion on the floor, the substitute motion, I think we can all get there. I think there needs to be that commitment of access to public trails, make that connectivity to what Mayor Jones mentioned, and to just get to that point. And is it going to take a while? Yes, but we are 6 years already into the process, and there's been times where we've been our own worst enemy, and I think it's time to move forward and, at the support of our colleague in Carlsbad. Thank you.
Mayor Blakespear.
Yes, thank you. Just briefly. So I think that Mayor Salas and Councilmember Alessio made really good points about going out for an RFP process that would be open to everybody. I think the county would do a great job, but I would like to rescind my second on the original motion in case this substitute motion fails, and say that I would be willing to either make or support a motion at that point that goes with what they were both saying about opening the RFP process up. And then secondarily, if this motion does pass, I think it's really important to emphasize to the public speakers and everybody who is watching exactly what was just said by Councilmember Gomez and Mayor Sotelo Solis, which is that the process is still ongoing, and that with the appropriate amount of public pressure and engagement, there's a possibility that access could happen at this property. I think that's an uphill battle and less likely, and the best course is that we do this right and ensure it as part of the RFP process so that we guarantee that. But if that doesn't end up happening because of this vote, I just want everyone to know that it's not closed, and I encourage a really high level of engagement, because I think you can make this happen with a lot of engagement. So thank you for those comments. And so that's a withdrawal of the second on the original motion.
Thank you, Mayor Blakespear. A couple comments. Number one, there's been talk about the RFP, and if we don't approve this and this, that, and the other thing. We are the board. We are the ones that are required to ultimately approve or reject anything that comes to us. That's our job. So I'm not moved by the suggestion that if we don't approve this, we're somehow failing. Number two, I believe the RFP was flawed from the beginning. There should have been the provision for trails from the get-go. I strongly agree with Mayor Blakespear's earlier comments that if we want the public to support preservation of lands, we've got to allow them access. So though I believe the County of San Diego would do a terrific job, I find myself in agreement with Councilmember Alicio and Mayor Blakespear that in fairness and complete transparency, this should go back out to a brand new RFP with the provision for trails, and then we can have a fair and open competition and move this along. So any other board comment? Mayor Salas.
Yes, so this is going in the direction that I think is going to be the best solution, is to go out for a brand new RFP. I know that there's a concern about the cost and the delay, but when you're talking about the earth, when you're talking about land, what you do with the decisions that you make today to change that land are forever there. So we have to make sure that whatever RFP goes out, that it's a complete one that encompasses all the issues that we've heard about, which is public access, which is, the preservation, the historic preservation of some very important sites. Also important related to cost and the estimate that we got from the county. Maybe it's going to be different when we put out the full RFP. So Catherine withdrew the motion. So I suppose we're going to vote on the original motion, or is it going to be, okay, if there hasn't been a substitute motion made in lieu of Catherine's, then I would like to make the motion to go out with a completely new RFP.
Mr. Kirk, can you clarify with the withdrawal of the second for the original motion? Does Councilmember Shoemaker's become now the original motion and we're open to a substitute? Help me.
Absolutely, Chair. So the original motion now stands without a second. So what was the substitute motion now becomes your primary motion and is really the only motion that is on the floor right now to be voted on.
So we would be then open to Mayor Salas's substitute motion to go with option 1, if I'm hearing you correctly.
It would be proper to make a substitute motion at this point, yes.
So Mayor Salas, yours was a substitute motion to go with option 1, new RFP.
Yes.
Thank you, and I'd be happy to second that. Any further comment?
Just a quick comment. I'll be supporting the substitute motion, Supervisor Desmond, but just be aware that what Gustavo had said, time is money. And quite frankly, there doesn't have to be an RFP if it's between 2 government agencies. But if that's the will of the board, then I'm going to support the substitute motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Schumacher.
Thank you. Just wanted to respond quickly to Chair Voss's comment, which I think is well put, that this board will be the final decision maker when it comes to the plans coming back, which include the final recommendation, which is to include the county in as the manager of the trails. So what we're doing right now is pushing this further down the line, which is time and money that we do not have, based upon essentially an agency wanting to get its mitigation credits when it had a chance to do so previously. So I just am doubling down on the recommendation that we move forward with the staff recommendation, which I do believe actually bridges the gap between what we had talked about previously, which is to include the county with the public access conversation. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Any further comment? I know Mayor Wells had popped up there a few minutes ago, but looks like he's...
I have a point of order. This is Vivian.
Yes, ma'am.
It's my understanding that Mayor Blake Spears' second belongs to the body and is not up for her to remove. When you have a motion and a second, the motion therefore belongs to the body.
Mr. Kirk?
Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to look into that. I would say right now it does not have a second if she has withdrawn her second. If, as we stand here, I would say that Mayor Salas's motion currently takes precedence, even if, in deference to Councilmember Moreno, if that original motion belongs to the body, the substitute motion still takes precedence in terms of voting. 2 substitute motions per Robert's rules may be on the floor at one point. And right now, the substitute motion with the highest priority for voting is the one that was made by Mayor Salas.
I don't dispute the second substitute motion. I'm disputing the notion that a second can be just idly removed. That motion for the purpose of voting and for the purpose of Robert's Rules of Order belongs to the body.
I think the end result is the same in either case if you can have a second motion. So we're going to go with Mayor Salas's motion with my second. Any final brief comment, please, so we can move to a vote? Francesca, please, the roll call vote.
Thank you. For the City of Carlsbad, Councilmember Schumacher.
No.
Thank you. For the City of Chula Vista, Mayor Salas.
Excuse me, what are we voting? Oh, the substitute motion?
We're voting on your motion, Mayor Salas.
Okay. Salas, aye.
Thank you very much. For the City of Coronado, Mayor Bailey.
Bailey, yes.
Thank you. For the County of San Diego, Supervisor Desmond.
Just want to make a clarification, or just for clarification, we're voting on that this, the Mayor Salas's motion is to accept item 1, cancel the RFP, send out for one with the trails included. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. Yes, Desmond, thank you.
Thank you. For the city of Del Mar, Mayor Haviland.
Haviland, yes.
Thank you. For the city of El Cajon, Mayor Wells.
Yes.
Thank you. For the city of Encinitas, Vice Chair Blakespear.
Blakespear, yes.
Thank you. For the city of Escondido, Mayor McNamara.
McNamara, no.
Thank you. For the city of Imperial Beach, Councilmember West.
West, no.
Thank you. For the city of La Mesa, Councilmember Alicio.
Alicio, yes.
Thank you. For the city of Lemon Grove, Mayor Vasquez.
Mayor Vasquez, yes.
Thank you. For the city of National City, Mayor Sotelo Solis.
Sotelo Solis, nay.
Thank you. For the city of Oceanside, Deputy Mayor Feller.
Yes.
Thank you. For the city of Poway, Chair Voss.
Yes.
Thank you. For the city of San Diego, Councilmember Moreno.
Moreno, no.
Thank you. For, the city of San Marcos, Mayor Jones.
Jones, yes.
Looks like we
Thank
missed
you.
getting Lemon Grove and National City. Lemon Grove voted yes. National City voted no.
Thank you. For the city of Santee, Mayor Minto.
Minto, yes.
Thank you. For the city of Solana Beach, Councilmember Zito.
Zito, yes.
Thank you. And for the city of Vista, Mayor Ritter.
Ritter, yes.
Thank you. And that does pass.
Thank you all. We will move back now to item number 13. Let's see, Mayor Wells, I believe you're introducing this one. Mayor Wells.
Okay. Hi. I'm sorry. Hi, everybody. Thank you, Chair Voss and board members. The audit committee met last Friday and heard a report from the staff on a proposed action plan. I believe the staff are ready to provide similar information for you this morning. The committee has accepted the plan. During our discussions, committee members have commented on the comprehensiveness of the plan and the risk analysis that had been done to develop the proposed actions, and also acknowledged the collaboration between management and the Office of the Independent Auditor during the development and review of the plan. The committee also noted the pending legal review that was part of this board's motion when the audit report was received in mid-September, and approved a recommendation that the board reconsider its decision to pursue any further legal review of the audit items. The audit has already been reviewed by an independent law firm, and the audit committee, as well as the independent performance auditor, do not believe another review would yield a different conclusion. With that, I'll ask Hassan and his team to provide their staff report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mayor Wells, and good afternoon, good morning to all of you. I just want to thank the management and thank Mary Kay, our independent auditor, and her staff for working together on putting forth an action plan. It's truly a collaboration that's needed. That action plan will go about putting the controls and needed policies forward. I want to thank Melissa and Andrea and all the staff that participated with Mary and Michelle and Lloyd from the independent office on putting this together. And with that, I'd like to give you a little bit more detail about the plan and turn it to Ray, the trainer, to do the report.
Excuse me, yeah, Hassan, this is Jim.
Sorry, Jim.
Yeah, I'm going to be filling in for you this morning. Thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. In mid-September, like you heard, immediately following your receipt of the salaries and comp audit, management began working on a draft action plan for implementation. And the three leaders primarily responsible for the effort are Melissa Kofeld, our Director of Organizational Effectiveness, Andre Dujon, our Chief Financial Officer, and Amberlyn Deaton, our Deputy General Counsel. In addition, Hassan and Ray Trainer, our other Chief Deputy, and I have provided guidance and will continue to ensure the successful implementation of the proposed actions. From a management perspective, and as you heard Hassan say in his opening remarks, we welcome suggestions for stronger policies, better processes and controls, anything like that that will help us improve as an organization. The action plan has been assembled in a very deliberate and collaborative manner. It incorporates the audit committee's recommendation, and it reflects the sentiment offered by the board members during your discussion of this on September 18th. Technical input has been provided by managers from our legal, our human resources, our finance, and our risk management staff. And these teams have and will continue to collaborate to address and mitigate the risks identified in the audit and coordinate all the proposed actions. Our risk manager will also ensure everything stays on track. And I'd like to add that that the feedback provided by Mary Kay's staff during the development of the plan has been incorporated. The plan the plan responds to each of the 37 recommendations identified in the final audit report. So this morning, I'm providing you a general overview of the action plan, but staff is always available to answer any detailed questions if you want to delve into any of the individual recommendations. 22 of the proposed actions are within management's purview, falling primarily within two broad areas, and that's finance and organizational effectiveness. In many cases, staff plan to integrate improvements like new and revised policies and procedures, and then evaluate them and how they're going over the next 12 to 18 months. 5 of the proposed actions involve changes to the bylaws and board policies and practices of the board. And staff will propose updates to these documents for the board's consideration. And this work will be led by John Kirk in our Office of General Counsel. And this will occur in the first half of calendar year 2021. In addition to the 5 actions that are within the board's purview, there are 2 recommendations that call for formal investigations of management actions. And for your reference for the attachment, you can look for recommendations 2.1 and 3.1 on pages 4 and 5 of the plan. And as noted in the staff report, and as well as the draft plan, the audit committee has recommended that the board reconsider the decision to conduct any further legal review. Of the 37 recommendations noted in the audit report, there are 8 that are not proposed to be implemented. And these are identified in the plan, and brief explanations on those pieces of paper are provided. In some cases, the proposal for no action reflects action taken by the audit committee or comments from board members during a discussion of the report in September. Other recommendations that have not been proposed to be implemented have been evaluated from a risk perspective, and in management's opinions, undertaking the recommendations would be a duplication of an existing function or work that's already been completed, which would result in unnecessary expense. In terms of next steps per Board Policy 39, the audit committee has the responsibility to oversee the implementation of corrective actions in response to performance audits. And we anticipate periodic reports will be presented to the audit committee to demonstrate progress in implementing the plan. Internally, management and program staff will meet regularly to coordinate the implementation activities, and there will be regular status review meetings with Mary Kay's team. Also, management has noted in the plan that the board's direction is that audit reports never be redacted except for names and personal information. So on behalf of Hassan and the Sandag management team, I hope my remarks have conveyed the seriousness for which we are responding to the audit, as well as our approach around continual improvement, collaboration, and communication. And we're confident that the implementation of these policies, practices, and controls described in the action plan will help Sandag become a more effective organization, and we will make the necessary commitments to ensure the plan is implemented.
So, go ahead.
Yeah, the action of this item, just so I can read the recommendation, is the Board of Directors is asked to accept the proposed action plan for the salaries and compensation performance and compliance audit. Additionally, the audit committee recommends that the board consider its decision to pursue further legal review of the subject matter audit. And with that, Melissa, Andre, Amberlynn, and I, and all of staff are ready to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Hassan, did you want to add something?
Yes, yes, Chair, thank you. Thank you, Jim. I appreciate the report. I just want to reemphasize again that Mary Kay and myself has one goal, and that is to strengthen the controls and have the right policies for the board. That's the goal from day one when we first met, and that's the goal still now. And I really do appreciate Mary Kay and her staff collaboration in this, because this is going to make our agency better and more suited for the future. While you might see in disagreements between management and Mary Kay, this disagreement yielded a much better process toward moving forward. So with that, I would ask you to ask the board to adopt the recommendation.
Thank you, Hassan. Francesca, do we have any public comment?
No, Chair, we don't have any public comments.
Thank you. Let me just clarify from the audit committee, Mayor Wells and Mary Kay, I'm guessing she's online here. So you have, there has been agreement between the Office of the Independent Performance Auditor and the audit committee that there's no need for further legal review? Mayor Wells?
Hi, sorry, technology. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, that's exactly right.
Okay.
We discussed it at the last meeting and everybody's in agreement.
Okay. And is Mary Kay online?
Good morning. Good morning, Chair
Good
Boss.
morning.
Yes, I'm online. Yes, it is agreed upon by all of us.
Okay. Thank you. Because I was the one that pushed so hard for that, I'm pleased that we have consensus and agreement that there's no need for further review. So I'd be happy to move to accept the proposed action plan and direct staff not to pursue further legal review. Other board comments, questions, a second would be
I'll give
great.
you a second.
Thank you, Mayor Wells. Board comments or questions? Okay. We have a motion and a second. I will call on the clerk for the roll call vote. Francesca.
Thank you. For the City of Carlsbad, Councilmember Schumacher.
Schumacher, aye.
Thank you. For the City of Chula Vista, Mayor Salas.
Salas, aye.
Thank you. For the City of Coronado, Mayor Bailey.
Bailey, yes.
Thank you. For the County of San Diego, Supervisor Desmond.
Desmond, aye.
Thank you. For the City of Del Mar, Mayor Haviland.
Haviland, yes.
Thank you. For the City of El Cajon, Mayor Wells.
Wells, yes.
Thank you. For the City of Encinitas, Vice Chair Blakespear.
Blakespear, yes.
Thank you. For the City of Escondido, Mayor McNamara.
McNamara, yes.
Thank you. For the City of Imperial Beach, Councilmember West.
West, yes.
Thank you. For the City of La Mesa, Councilmember Alicio.
Alicio, yes.
Thank you. For the City of Lemon Grove, Mayor Vasquez.
Mayor Vasquez, yes.
Thank you. For the City of National City, Mayor Sotelo Solis.
Sotelo Solis, aye.
Thank you. For the City of Oceanside, Deputy Mayor Feller.
Feller, yes.
Thank you. For the City of Poway, Chair Voss.
Aye.
Thank you. For the City of San Diego, Councilmember Moreno.
Morano, yes.
Thank you. For the City of San Marcos, Mayor Jones.
Jones, yes.
Thank you. For the City of Santee, Mayor Minto.
Minto, yes.
Thank you. For the City of Solana Beach, Councilmember Zito.
Zito, yes.
Thank you. And for the City of Vista, Mayor Ritter.
Ritter, yes.
Thank you very much, and that passes unanimously.
Thank you. We will move on to item 15. It calls for us to discuss the potential renewal of the employment contract with Sandag's Independent Performance Auditor, Mary Kashmashrab. The contract was attached to the report on this item as a term of 2 years currently ending April 2nd of next year. The contract will automatically renew for a new 2-year term under the same terms and conditions if we do not take action to modify or terminate it. And our deadline to take any action is early next month. The Audit Committee met last week to review the performance of the independent performance auditor, and they found her performance to be satisfactory. Based upon this, I'm proposing that we not take any action on this item today and allow the agreement to renew on its current terms and conditions. If any member feels otherwise, you may make a motion to that effect, but otherwise we will move on and allow the contract to renew. Francesca, do we have any comment from the public?
No, Chair, I don't see any hands raised.
Any member comment or questions?
Chair Voss,
Yes, Mr. Wells.
I just want to tell you that the entire audit committee, including some of the independent auditors that are working on the committee, very, very fine attorneys and auditors in their own right, I believe they all agreed that this was the right course of action.
Thank you, Mayor. Any other comment from board members? Thank you. Hearing and seeing no other comments. Francesca, do we have any continued public comments?
No, Chair, I don't see any hands raised.
Thank you. That concludes our agenda for today. Thanks for hanging in there, all of you. I promised to get you out of here before noon, and we're going to make it. Our next board meeting is scheduled for December 4th. We are